and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
I'm Andy Hum. Welcome to Gay USA, a country in crisis. And in Anne's absence this week, I am honored to welcome to the table.
Hi, I'm Chris Cooper, and I am filling in for Anne this week.
Well, and we have a lot of news to cover this week.
News.
And I really mean it about the country being in crisis. It's piling up. In Arkansas, to start with, a bill is allowed to become law that stops localities in the state from enacting civil rights protections beyond what the state does, effectively banning LGBT rights laws.
And criticism of the national groups who didn't do enough to stop that from becoming law is mounting.
Along with the criticism of the Clintons, who were from Arkansas, who were silent. Wyoming defeated an LGBT rights bill, but I read it, and by the time they got to vote on it, it was not worth having.
There was one same-sex marriage performed in Texas, but the Texas Attorney General wants it voided, declared null and void, and any other same-sex marriages in Texas have been blocked.
The Pope has compared transitioning as transgender to nuclear war. I kid you not.
Shortly, same-sex couples, 2 men or 2 women, will be able to have a child who is biologically the product of the 2 of them. We'll explain how that's going to happen.
I'm going to tell you about 2 big wins in the fight against HIV criminalization.
Andy will review a play by David Ives.
And we'll give you the gay angle on the Oscars.
And I wrote a book. I'm going to tell you about it.
Terrific. What's the name of it?
It's called Songs of the Metamythos.
You're going to have to stay tuned for that. And you're going to want to. All right, so we start in Arkansas.
Right.
And the legislature passed this bill that says just like Tennessee, localities in our state can't, in their civil rights laws, go beyond what we at the state level had. We want to keep everything consistent for business so that things are going to be fine. But it's effectively aimed at us.
It is called SB 202. Remember that, because you're going to hear a lot about it. And basically, it invalidates any local anti-discrimination provisions that were in place and prevents localities from passing them.
Well, the fact is they didn't have any in Arkansas until recently,
right.
When Eureka Springs passed one, knowing that they were going to pass this statewide bill.
Right.
Little Rock is in the process of doing that, and Conway just did it.
Right. And in fact, I think Conway did it in response to the passage of SB 202.
So we have not been successful in overturning the Tennessee law that does this, but the people in Arkansas who are passing these gay rights laws in their localities, that they're finally doing it, are going to sue, and they're going to have to prove animus, sort of hatred of us or that kind of stuff, in order to defeat these laws.
For those of you who remember Colorado Amendment 2, which
1996,
which was an amendment to the Colorado Constitution that prevented any laws favoring gays or lesbians from being passed. That was overturned by the Supreme Court. The difference here, what makes this far more dangerous, is they're not specifically targeting us.
Right.
They don't mention gays or lesbians. They just say that whatever the state offers, no locality can go beyond that in terms of anti-discrimination. The problem with that is that when you have these really conservative states where we could get anti-discrimination locally in the liberal cities, now that's going to be invalidated and we can't get that anymore. That's a big
we have one in a lot of cities across the country in what you would call red states.
Right.
But now, it's not surprising that Governor Hutchinson did this, even though he's so into local control.
This is Asa Hutchinson, who's the governor of Arkansas.
He's a 1973 graduate of the racially discriminatory Bob Jones University, which didn't allow interracial dating back in those days, and lost federal funding as a result. But he was there. So Tennessee. Now
I was just going to say, since you mentioned Tennessee, now, since the passage of SB 202, there's been a copycat law introduced in West Virginia.
Yes.
So what you're going to see a lot of this. We're going to lose on these.
Well, yeah, and I guess we should just take a time. Why is this happening now?
Okay.
All this stuff. Now, part of it is the marriage onslaught. All these states that don't want to do it are being told they have to do same-sex marriage, and they're pissed off about that. So they're trying to get us in other ways.
Well, not just get us, but they see things like, and we'll talk about it, the florist in Washington who, because there was an anti-discrimination law, was told, well, you have to provide flowers for this same-sex wedding. They want to stop stuff like that, so they're trying to prevent anti-discrimination laws.
But the other big thing that happened, folks, and you've got to focus on elections. Elections have consequences.
Yep.
In 2010, when legislatures were elected around the country, it was an off year, there was no presidential on the ballot. The Koch brothers and the other plutocrats in this country invested heavily in buying up legislatures around the country in blue states like Pennsylvania and New York State Senate, et cetera. And they won. They won those elections, and they won the governorships. And for the big reason was, if you elect people in 2010, you get to draw the lines for the next 10 years for the state legislature.
Absolutely.
So you can make them even more Republican, and you get to draw the House lines. This is why more people vote Democrat, but we have a Republican House of Representatives because they drew the lines. And we're not going to be able to undo this until 2020. And maybe not even then, because again, they drew the lines.
This is why it is absolutely imperative. I know I sound like a broken record. Half the time I come on the show I say this, but it's not just about Republicans good, Democrats bad. It's about Republican control of legislatures is a nightmare for us. And unfortunately, that's what happened in the last election. A lot of legislatures turned Republican.
Right.
So you are going to see bills, copycat bills like SB 202, because the right wing now perceives this as their path ahead. And they're going to push them through these Republican-controlled legislatures, and we're not going to be able to stop it.
Now, we were able to stop that terrible religious freedom bill in Arizona. We got Jan Brewer, a right-winger, to veto it. But partly that was because Arizona had a lot of convention business, a lot of people coming in from out of the state. Tourism was very important to them. And they convinced her it was going to be bad for business. But that did not happen in Arkansas. And in fact, there was not much of a national outcry about this.
HRC barely made a peep. They made a few mewling noises about 5 days before the bill would have become law.
Now, wait a minute. HRC, is that Hillary Rodham Clinton?
Yes.
Or is it the Human Rights Campaign?
Take your pick. No,
and Bill Clinton, silent about this stuff.
The reason why we are singling out the Clintons, in case anyone has forgotten, is because they're originally from Arkansas.
Yes, he was governor.
Bill is originally from Arkansas. Hillary is originally from Illinois.
Bill was from Arkansas, and as governor, made me an Arkansas traveler, and I'm supposed to represent the state. And Arkansas, you're making it very hard. But I will say, I've heard from my niece down there, my sister down there, and they've been involved in demonstrations, and they're horrified. But they're saying it's not just human rights. This legislature is destroying education, everything else. These legislatures are also trying to pass these laws that say localities can't pass environmental laws against fracking or laws for plastic, stopping plastic bags, things like that. So it's all part of a big corporate takeover of America. And the Human Rights Campaign couldn't get Walmart, which is supposed to be pro-gay, to get off their ass until the very last second, and it was too late.
Until after it had become law. They actually issued, Walmart issued its statement after the close of business.
So what do we need? We need comprehensive federal LGBT rights legislation. We're not going to get that from the Republican Congress. Or we need court decisions and decisions by the EEOC that say Title VII covers, which is sex discrimination, covers gays, and they're already saying it covers transgenders.
I think the court route is going to be, it could go either way because of the way that these are very cleverly phrased bills. And another point, I think, is that we rely too much on the courts to defend our rights.
I agree.
We've got to start making inroads in legislatures and in people's attitudes. We've been doing that on marriage, and in fact, half the country thinks we're already protected on a national level from being fired for being gay or lesbian or transgender, when it's just not true.
Right.
So we've got to get that word out. We can't just rely on the courts, I don't think, not on this.
Now let's look at what's happening in some other states.
Well, no, actually, before we get away from Arkansas, there's also a second bill that they're pushing through.
Yes.
which would be a Religious Freedom Restoration Act,
Yes.
which would give people the right to discriminate. Now that is looking a little bit more dubious. The governor who allowed the other bill, SB 202, to pass into law, he's saying, well, I'm not sure about this one. So we don't know if this one is going to pass. And hopefully, with SB 202's passage, galvanizing our side, we'll be able to block this so-called Religious Freedom Restoration Act.
The Senate in North Carolina just passed one of those religious liberties bill, license to discriminate bills. But in Georgia, something very interesting is happening. Georgia Equality, the LGBT group, hired Michael Bowers. Do you recognize that name? He's 72 now.
Bowers v. Hardwick.
Yeah, he was the Attorney General of Georgia that successfully defended the anti-sodomy law. We didn't get rid of the sodomy laws in this country completely until 2003, and more about that later, and that was in the Lawrence v. Texas decision. So, they have hired him to fight these religious liberty laws, and he wrote that these bills will permit everyone to become a law unto themselves. Just by claiming religious conviction, you'll be able to do anything that you want to do.
That's the dilemma that the right wing faces. They want Christian conservatives to be able to discriminate against us,
Yes.
but they can't single us out. So they have to write it so broadly that it will allow, for example, a devout Muslim taxi driver to refuse to pick up a woman fare because she's not, her head isn't covered or she's not wearing a burqa.
Right.
So those laws will never, I don't think those laws will ever pass constitutional muster.
Now, the EEOC is looking to use the Civil Rights Act of 1964. This is actually happening this week, which prohibits discrimination based on sex to cover us. Eric Holder has said it does. He's the Attorney General of the United States, and all right. So that's happening. So that's very hopeful.
Well, while we're hopscotching states, there's also a freedom to discriminate law that just, in other words, another Religious Freedom Restoration Act that has just passed the state Senate in Indiana. So
Right.
that is not law yet, but they're trying to make it so.
In the Texas state legislature, Debbie Riddle, a Republican, filed a bill to make it a Class A misdemeanor, 1 year in prison and a $4,000 fine for transgender people to use a locker room, toilet, or shower that does not comport with their gender, at least as she sees it. And if a business cooperates with this, they can get 2 years in prison if they do. And there's a similar bill in Florida. Scary stuff.
In Michigan, this is interesting, talking about people being able to discriminate because of their religion. There was a Christian pediatrician who refused to treat a 6-month, no, not even 6 months, I think it was 6-day-old baby because her two moms, obviously, were lesbians, and she found that religiously objectionable. So she said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm canceling your appointment, and I can't treat you."
Jesus did not want her to. She prayed over it.
She did pray over it.
Yes.
She was very polite when she told the lesbians that she would not be able to serve them. I guess because she felt she was doing this from a place of love, that it would be okay. I just have to say this: some people will find it harsh. Christians who believe that doing this from a place of love makes it okay. Your love is irrelevant. It has no bearing on law. It has no bearing on what we are entitled to as our rights.
Or as Andy Humm is fond of saying, you are worshiping a false god, if that's what you believe.
There you go.
So, in Indiana, the Senate passed one of those religious freedom to discriminate bills, 40-10.
Yeah.
The sponsors said that Christians in the U.S. are now facing the perils of Jews in Nazi Germany. I mean, they've whipped themselves up into thinking this. In Kentucky, the a Senate panel approved a bill to require transgender students to use bathrooms matching their biological sex or use a unisex single-sex toilet. It passed 8-1.
Similar to what you just talked about being proposed in Texas.
At least the House there is Democratic controlled, but I don't know if that's going to help.
And sort of a flip side of all of this, lest you think that we are against religious freedom.
No.
Lambda Legal is actually filing an amicus brief in a case out of Oklahoma against Abercrombie and Fitch, where a Muslim woman applied for a job, but she didn't get it because she was wearing a headscarf. And Abercrombie and Fitch felt that didn't fit their image.
So we're supporting freedom of expression and saying you shouldn't do that.
Exactly. Lambda Legal is weighing in on her side of this Muslim woman, and it's totally appropriate because we are totally in favor of freedom of religion as long as it's not impinging on other people's rights.
But it's not a joke, but if you're a guy, I assume you still have to take your shirt off at Abercrombie & Fitch if you're going to work there. It's not, that is the image that they put forth.
Oh, very much so.
In Wyoming, the House there defeated a bill to ban discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. Now, it lost 26-33, which is pretty close, and that sounds good. But it got loaded with such bad amendments before they voted on it. It would allow discrimination on juries, in parks, bathrooms, childcare, charter schools, kindergarten, and first grade.
So what's the point?
So it's a bill like that is just not worth having.
No.
You know, don't tell me, oh, well, everybody else would be covered. You've given up the principle, Wyoming, and you're the equality state.
Well, meanwhile, back to Texas. In Plano, Texas, there was a petition to repeal rights ordinance and anti-discrimination protections for lesbians and gay men, and it failed. The petition was tossed by the city secretary, because of a problem in how they had worded it. And
because they claimed that the ordinance regulates bathrooms, and the city authority said has nothing to do with bathrooms.
Exactly.
So they threw it out. We'll see what happens there.
Unfortunately, again, with laws like SB 202, which may be put forth in Texas, I would almost bet that it will be put forth in Texas, it would invalidate something like Plano's anti-discrimination laws.
All right, we're hopscotching, and you got to tell me if you've covered some of these stories, because I'm trying to listen and cover because we've got a lot of news. Yeah. In Iowa, a Senate subcommittee advanced a bill to ban conversion therapy for minors, MINORS, young people.
Iowa can actually be kind of a progressive state.
It can be. The Trans-Pacific trade deal has been criticized by 6 out LGBT members of the House for including Brunei and Malaysia, which are very anti-gay. Interestingly, there is a gay equality caucus in the Congress. It had about 114 members. But this year they said, well, as a lot of caucuses do, you got to pay dues, $400. 53 people dropped out. They didn't want to pay the dues. The new defense secretary, Ashton Carter, said he is open to ending the ban on transgender service members. That's encouraging.
Which is excellent. Meanwhile, in Washington State, a win for us. I know in this week of incredibly bad news, there's a win for us. There's a woman who ran Arlene's Flowers. You've probably heard this story before, because I know Ann and Andy have talked about it. Her name is Baronelle Stutzman, and she refused to do
That's not her title. That's her name, Baronelle. I'm not making fun of her.
And she refused to do the flowers for a same-sex wedding. She got called up on because Washington does have anti-discrimination protections, and she's been found not in contempt. What's the phrase I'm looking for? She's been found in violation of those anti-discrimination laws, and they're trying to get her to settle. They're saying, look, pay a $2,000 fine, blah, blah, blah.
But she has to promise not to discriminate anymore.
And she won't do that.
And Jesus told her to discriminate. She says, I'm a nice person. I served this guy when he came into my place for 9 years, but when he wanted to get married, I won't do it. And I think she needs to reflect on that, because she's probably baked a lot of cakes for a lot of weddings that Jesus doesn't approve of.
She is positioning herself as a martyr for the right wing and doing it really well. I got to say, when you read some of her quotes, they're really she hits the right notes. She talks about how her freedom is being violated and how she won't sell herself out like Judas for 30 pieces of silver. Right. And it's going to be very motivating for the right wing.
But, that's what, people did when we tried to integrate this country around racial discrimination, and they said that it wasn't permitted by their faith and things like that. Well, that's what the Ku Klux Klan arose out of.
Well, exactly, and
the Christian religion.
The judge in her case said basically that. A judge named Alex Ekstrom said for over 135 years in the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has held that laws may prohibit religiously motivated action as opposed to belief. The courts have confirmed the power of the legislative branch to prohibit conduct it deems discriminatory, even where the motivation for that conduct is grounded in religious belief.
Right. Now, we did get rid of the sodomy laws in 2003, but in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, 2 men were arrested in the backseat of a car for having sex and charged with sodomy, a crime against nature. So the judge threw out that count, and they got, even though they were locked up and everything, but they could still face trespassing charges. The police chief said he'd send out a memo on the unconstitutionality of the law. Walmart, the EEOC ruled that they discriminated against lesbian employees who sought health coverage, a lesbian employee who sought health coverage for her ailing wife, and they called it sex discrimination. They tried to enroll in the program in 2008. They were denied until 2014, by which time the spouse had all this cancer and $100,000 in bills, so they're trying to fix that.
This was in Massachusetts, where obviously same-sex marriage is legal, and Walmart just refused to acknowledge this. So should we use that as our transition to marriage news?
Well, in a minute, in Lawrence, Massachusetts, some horrifying news, intimate partner violence. Miguel Rivera, 50, is accused of stabbing his boyfriend, Oscar Mendez, 39, to death. He also was injured in the fracas between the two. Right, yes, let's do some marriage news.
Well, in Alabama, it goes on and on. Roughly 300 people gathered at the state capitol to protest same-sex marriage. I'm surprised actually it wasn't more. There are 7 counties that are still barring same-sex marriage only. In other words, there are a few counties, just a few, that are refusing to do marriages altogether. But there are 7 that are offering marriage licenses to heterosexual couples, but not offering to the same-sex couples.
And the probate judge in Mobile, who was ordered to do the same-sex marriages, now says he won't process Carrie Searcy's second parent adoption application. Now, she's the plaintiff in the marriage case. He says, I won't do this until the Supreme Court rules on all this.
So they're
having another suit.
Exactly. The lawyers for Carrie are bringing, just to make him obey the judge's order, Judge Granade, who ordered the recognition of the marriage.
Now, let's talk about what's happening in Texas. And we have a picture of this couple. The state high court granted the state attorney general's petition for an order to stop a county clerk in Austin from issuing marriage licenses to same-sex couples, because one was issued to this couple. There is a state case on appeal at the Fifth Circuit, which was argued on January 9th, and we don't have a ruling. Last week, though, the probate judge in Austin ruled the ban unconstitutional in recognizing the common law marriage of a surviving lesbian partner, and then the couple asked the state to let them get a license. Another couple asked them to get a license, and he said they went ahead and did it. But there's been no further licenses in Texas, and probably won't be until either the Texas Supremes or the Fifth Circuit rules. But we got one couple married, and the Attorney General is trying to get them overthrown.
The Attorney General thinks there will be legal chaos if that one same-sex marriage is not voided.
And also back to Alabama, the right-wing groups filed an emergency petition there to get the high court there, led by Judge Roy Moore, to stop same-sex marriages. The Human Rights Campaign is asking to see Moore's phone and email records to see if he colluded with these groups illegally. And okay.
Well, let's talk about a different country within our own country's borders, namely the Indian nations.
Yes.
There was actually a long article in the New York Times about how many of the Indian nations are struggling with the issue of same-sex marriage. Specifically, they talked about the Navajos and how there's a split in the community. And unfortunately, I have to say it, but once again, the root of the split seems to be those who are conservative Christian don't want it to happen. But there are others who say, hey, this is, the Navajo tradition, our ancient tradition, didn't really have anything against this. And in fact, there may have been one or two things that, would sort of lean towards it. So the Navajos are struggling with this. Another big tribe is struggling with this. But meanwhile, in Alaska, good news, because 2 tribes, the Tlingit and the Haida, Indian tribes, have their executive councils have adopted new statutes that permit same-sex marriage.
They are.
So that is excellent news.
On the other hand, in North Carolina, a Senate committee there passed a bill to allow magistrates to refuse to perform marriages of same-sex couples if it violates their religious beliefs. On the other hand, in Dallas, the fire department pension fund board voted to approve survivor and pension benefits for same-sex couples. And then there's the big same-sex marriage case at the Supreme Court. And the court sort of made a determination this week, I guess it is, that the two questions before the court, each one has to be argued by one lawyer each. So now these 4 cases, with all these lawyers involved, have to sit down and say who's going to get to stand up in front of the Supreme Court and answer the question whether the 14th Amendment requires the state to license a marriage between people of the same sex or require the state to recognize a marriage from another state. Those are the 2 questions.
Now, Ann and Andy have been telling you for months about how all these lawyers have been jockeying to make sure that their case is the one that lands before the Supreme Court to have this great decision come down. And now they're all going to get into one big hair-pulling fight to see who gets to argue it.
They may end up with a lawyer who's outside who just is very experienced at arguing before the Supreme Court to do this. I hope you're all getting along and can make peace and get us the right person in those cases. All right.
Well, good news on a federal level, and you'll see a lot of good news actually federally because we happen to have an administration in office that favors our rights. The new regulations came down that family and medical leave will be recognized regardless of what state you live in. So if you are married, same-sex married, and you move to a state where it's not recognized, for federal reasons, it won't matter in terms of your being able to claim family and medical leave. So that's great news.
For things like this, it's nice having Obama in there.
Exactly.
And the State Department just appointed Randy Perry, we have a picture of him, as our new envoy for LGBT rights internationally. This is something we've been lobbying for. We've been trying to get a bill passed to do it, but the President just went ahead, or the Secretary of State, John Kerry, went ahead and appointed him to take on this task.
So, Andy, let me ask you this.
All right.
How important is it for us to have a Democratic winner of the next presidential election? We not only have all these initiatives that the Obama administration has put forth, but Ruth Bader Ginsburg, is she going to last another 6 years on the court?
You never know. She's only 81. John Paul Stevens is still alive, and he stayed on the court until he was 90.
And then the other thing is, with huge Democratic turnout, hopefully in a presidential election, would we maybe be able to reverse some of these Republican gains in state legislatures?
Well, the importance, obviously, of having a Democratic president at the least is although Jeb Bush this week announced that his communications coordinator is an out gay man, Tim Miller.
You got to explain this to me.
He's a right-winger, but he loves Jeb. So, this is the unintended consequence of liberation. But people start come out who work for anti-gay candidates.
But I read up on him, and he's pro same-sex marriage. Jeb Bush is not.
Well,
What's he thinking?
I don't think that shows proper self-respect. Although he would just say that's not the most important issue in my life, and I think it should be the most important issue in your life until you get equal rights.
I agree.
All right. What else? CNN poll: 63% of Americans say gay couples have a constitutional right to marry, up from 49%. Republican support is up to 42. Dems 75.
Did you talk about Nebraska?
No.
Okay, in Nebraska, where same-sex marriage is still banned, a federal judge is considering not just the ban itself, but a more immediate relief as to whether couples will be harmed if the ban stays in place while the judge is considering whether the ban should be invalidated or not. So that's going on in Nebraska.
Right. In Chicago, they elected the first out gay Latino alderman. Carlos Rosa is his name. HUD has issued guidance telling shelters to honor transgender people's self-identified gender in accessing housing and programs. In Michigan, you did this. You did the doctor.
Well, in Georgia, the fire chief of Atlanta, who got fired because he was handing out his anti-gay book to his employees, he's suing. He's decided that he was fired because of his religious beliefs, and so I expect this will play out in the courts for a little while.
Okay, we have a picture of Mama Jean Nutter from Tennessee, who passed away this past week at the age of 54, a beloved member in the community there in Tennessee, one of the persons who started the Pride thing going and all that kind of stuff, and just was we're very sad to see someone go so young at the age of 54. What else do I have?
Well, unfortunately, if we're going to do obituaries, there was a death out in California in Rancho Mirage, their former mayor, and I'm looking to put his name in front of me.
Yes, Hines, Scott Hines.
Yes, thank you. Scott Hines died at the age of 45, leaving behind 4 kids. His family says that he had liver cancer. The death is also that he was battling depression, and some people said that he lost his battle with depression, so make of that what you will. But he's the former mayor of Rancho Mirage, California, out in the Coachella Valley, and he's dead at the age of 42.
Right. The 9th Gay Games, by the way, which were in 2014, turned out to be the most profitable ever in the 32-year history, actually yielding some profits for some of the foundations there that work with LGBT people in Cleveland and in Akron. Do I have any other news? At Boston University of Medicine, they found a biological basis for transgender identity, which contests the idea that trans people choose the gender that they prefer.
You mentioned that there's a new appointee who's openly gay in the Department of Defense. Did you mention that the Secretary of the Defense, Ash Carter, is in favor of trans service in the military?
And the gay person that he appointed
is also in favor of it.
Right.
So it looks like things are moving in the right direction.
We hope so.
We hope.
Because that's the undone work of repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell. All right. Do we want to? I also want to note the passing of Harold Price Farringer, 87. Now, a lot of you, may not know, but very prominent civil rights lawyer who defended all kinds of freedom of expression, including gay expression, including, being able to access erotica and things like that. He was kind of a square guy who always stood up on those issues. 87 years old.
Shall we go international?
Please.
Okay. Well, I'll let you talk about Pope Francis and what he said about how transgendered gender theory is equivalent to nuclear arms.
This is in a book, and he was being interviewed, and he essentially compared it, transitioning to transgender, as bad as nuclear war. Here's the quote. Let's think of nuclear arms, of the possibility to annihilate, in a few instances, a very high number of human beings. Let's think also of genetic manipulation or of the gender theory that does not recognize the order of creation. So he says, with this attitude, man commits a new sin, that against God, the creator. I mean, this is it's just outlandish kind of stuff. And I just don't think he understands the issues, and he's really causing, that stuff really makes people think that transgender people are some sort of threat to society.
Well, for those of you who think that Pope Francis is a breath of fresh air, you may have to revise your opinion down a little bit. But
meanwhile, members of New Ways Ministry, which is a pro-gay group, went to the Vatican, 50 of them, and they say they got a front row seat at the Pope's audience. And they say it was an incredible honor. But they didn't get anything of substance. They didn't talk, but this is symbols. Okay.
All right, I'm going to be blunt here, moving to New Zealand, because there's something incredibly stupid going on there.
What?
New Zealand Pride has been happening, and this bank, ANZ Bank, created these ATMs that were decorated in festive, gay logo decorations, and they've been vandalized. And originally, it was thought it was homophobic. No, it was a gay group that was vandalizing these ATMs because they thought that our queerness was being co-opted for commercial purposes. Look, the group is called Queers Against Injustice. They've also splattered pink paint on a bank. And if you got that kind of objection, okay, articulate it. But vandalizing a gay pride, something that acknowledges gay pride. I mean, how long do we have to fight to get acknowledged by big corporations in terms of our gayness? So I just think this is incredibly short-sighted and the wrong way to make your message.
We skipped over the Dallas story about the trans pediatric program. And I think we should run that video, don't you think?
I think we should.
This is a real breakthrough in the Southwest to have such a unit. So why don't we show you the video from Dallas about that program.
A program in the Southwest for young people who do not identify with their gender.
And it's right here in our backyard. Stephanie Lucero has the story of a teenager who sought help.
Cammie's given name was Cameron. The transformation to become a girl has begun.
I've dealt with the ridicule. I've dealt with my whole family just kind of disowning me because they didn't understand it.
Cammie is 15, a freshman, high school student here in the DFW area, but she's not ready to say where.
I've dealt with losing friends, a lot of bullying, a lot of hate.
I think it was hardest when Cammie got so depressed and discouraged and despondent that she didn't want to live anymore.
They've gone through very stressful puberty, and at that time they have attempted to kill themselves several times. So I think parental support is key.
Dr. Zemina Lopez oversees the Gender Education and Care Interdisciplinary Support Program at Children's.
They feel they don't belong to either gender, so when they're very young, it's hard.
So counseling is a major component of the program.
I grew up very devout, member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I was excommunicated when I made the decision to embrace my child, but I was going to embrace my child before I would ever lose her.
Cammie is now taking puberty blockers and hormone replacement therapy.
As it's so much happier.
Now, the program here at Children's Hospital is just for children. It does not complete the process. Dr. Lopez says that surgery cannot be performed until the age of 18 or older at an adult hospital. Well, Cammie says that she will change her body anatomically when she becomes an adult. Live in Dallas, Stephanie Lucero, CBS 11 News.
Steph, thanks.
So there are terrible things happening in Texas, and there are great things happening in Texas, and that's what the Gay USA brings us.
We're hopscotching a little bit since we had sort of already dove into international news.
Yes, so we'll go back to international
We'll go back to
news.
international. In Egypt, Mona Iraqi, the so-called journalist who orchestrated that televised police sting that rounded up 26 men.
Who were acquitted. Although one of them tried to kill himself afterwards.
Acquitted of homosexual charges, of indecency charges, because homosexuality technically is not illegal in Egypt. Well, she is now up on charges of for broadcast, and also the broadcaster who showed the program for libel and defamation.
Yeah.
So that's good news.
Now, Finland, the president there signed the marriage equality bill. And oh, great. It goes into effect March 1st. 2017! They pass a bill, and it takes 2 years to put it into effect.
The foreign minister in Serbia apologized for anti-gay comments or comments that could be perceived as anti-gay that he had made earlier.
The European Court of Human Rights has ruled that against the Equal Love campaign, Peter Tatchel's group, which was trying to get them to equalize things so that straight people could have civil partnerships. Gay people in Britain can have civil partnerships or marriages. Straight people can only have marriages. But they ruled against them. And there's another case that may come forward, but that one's dead.
Switzerland is taking its first steps towards same-sex marriage, which is encouraging.
Parliamentary committee. In Northern Ireland, the Democratic Unionist Party wants to allow businesses to refuse to serve LGBT people. And they're going to vote on this in the Assembly on February 27th.
Meanwhile, in Ireland, they now have a date for their same-sex marriage referendum, which is widely expected to pass. That date is Friday, May 22nd, the same day that two major motion pictures open here in the United States. One of them, Tomorrowland, and the other one, the Vatican tapes.
Okay.
Make of that what you will.
I didn't even know about those. But Ireland, I wouldn't count my chickens in Ireland until they vote.
Good point.
Because even though the polls have been decent, they haven't been overwhelming. In Israel, an Israeli-British research team discovered how to produce. You explain this.
Okay.
How to produce egg and sperm cells using stem cells so same-sex couples can have biological children without egg or sperm donation.
Right. Basically, the idea is you take the cells of an adult, you bring them back to a stem cell state and then to a germ cell state, which means they've only got half the chromosomes they normally would have, like you would find in sperm or in egg, and then you can actually generate sperm and egg from those cells. So for example, if you were a lesbian, you would be able to take your skin cell and take it back to a stem cell state and then to a germ cell state and create a sperm, even though you're a lesbian. That sperm carries the genetic material of the lesbian. That sperm can then fertilize the egg of her partner, and the baby would be the genetic product of the two lesbians. Now, this is still a little ways away. They've made progress on this, but the big problem is something called DNA differential methylation. It's a fancy way of saying that genes get tagged as basically male or female. And once they're tagged, the body regularly strips away these tags and adds these tags. But once they're tagged, genes that are tagged male cannot merge with other genes that are tagged male to create a new being.
Got to get rid of the tags.
You got to get rid of the tags, and that's what they're working on. But it's going to happen. And it's going to happen soon.
Well, unless the Pope forbids getting rid of the tags.
Well, that's the beauty of it, is that this is a direct result of exactly the kind of research that the Vatican has been in favor of, because they didn't want embryonic stem cells used.
Yeah.
So this is research that takes adult cells and turns them into stem cells.
Good.
So, that's
All
what
right.
the Vatican wanted. That's what they got.
In Madrid, the head of security for the metro sent out a memo saying gays, musicians, and beggars should be regularly checked for their tickets on transport. They do that in Europe. They come and check your ticket. He was fired for saying that, or for issuing that. In Colombia, the High Court allows same-sex couples to adopt only in cases where one of the partners has a biological child. In Saudi Arabia, they arrested several young men for dancing at a birthday party. An official warned that it can lead to immorality or even homosexuality.
Back to South America. In Argentina, the couple who was South America's first legally married same-sex couple is divorcing.
That's what gay marriage is for, so you can get divorced too.
There you go. And then right over the border in Chile, foreign same-sex marriages will now be recognized. So that's a good advance there.
AIDS news.
Yes.
All right. A couple of things happened around HIV criminalization. The first one is from New York, from the Court of Appeals. You want to talk about that one?
Actually, why don't you start?
They reduced the charges for a young man who allegedly had consensual sex without disclosing HIV. He had been charged with a felony for reckless endangerment in the first degree. The trial court reduced it to the second degree, and that was essentially upheld by the court. There is no evidence that the defendant's consensual sex exposed the victim to the risk of HIV out of any malevolent desire for the victim to contract the virus. That's a win. And then the other one is from the Army. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces, I didn't even know there was such a thing, reversed the conviction of an HIV-positive serviceman on charges of aggravated assault for having unprotected sex at a swingers thing. Because again, they said the chances of him transmitting HIV this way were minimal, so they reduced it from aggravated assault. They said it's not likely to produce death or grievous harm. But they're upholding an adultery charge, even though he was at the swingers party with his wife.
Meanwhile, there's been a new compound, a protein that's worked well in monkeys to block HIV transmission. They're saying it almost works like a vaccine.
Yeah.
There's hope for it, but again, it's only in monkeys right now.
It's from the Scripps Research Institute in Florida, if you want to look that up. And there's a UK study on PrEP, which found that it reduced new infections by 86%.
It's actually two studies.
Yeah, well, I'm going to talk about the French-Canadian one also.
Okay.
There were 2 infections out of 286 people who took the drugs, and those were due to lack of adherence. And then the French-Canadian study also showed an 86% reduction when PrEP is available on demand.
Well, this is the only thing to remember with that one, though, is that it was taken when you've had risky sex. You were supposed to take it right before and right afterwards. The only problem is that they don't know how often these men were having risky sex. So if they were doing it every day and they're taking it before and afterwards every day, it might have been a cumulative effect of taking the drug as opposed to a one-off effect.
Yes.
So that's why the CDC is saying be cautious about these conclusions.
And there was a study that came out this week that said paying people $280 a year to take their pills doesn't have a very large effect on that.
And the CDC also said that over 90% of new U.S. HIV infections come from those not getting treatment. The research also shows that further the people that progress in HIV care, the less likely they are to transmit the virus.
And in Rhode Island, there's a bill to intensify the penalties for exposing someone to HIV without disclosing your status. The state has no HIV-specific law, just a general misdemeanor law for exposing someone to an STI, which is a standard kind of a thing. But there's some guy there who's hell-bent, a Republican, on getting this through, and he's got a lot of support among some Democrats.
And finally, the American Foundation for AIDS Research, AMFAR, has announced a $100 million initiative to find a cure for HIV within 5 years. We wish them luck. We hope it comes to pass. It would be a fantastic thing if it did.
And we're not going to show it because we're running out of time, but there is a very cute video featuring Alan Cumming called the Celibacy Challenge. If you're on our email list, write to me at andyhum@AOL. I'll send you the link to it, but you can look it up. Celibacy Challenge. It's a cute play on what's going on with the blood ban and how our blood is still banned. Okay, let's talk to entertainment news, and let's talk about your book, Chris Cooper. Pull it out there.
My book is
Chris
called...
Cooper has written a book called Songs of the Meta-Mythos, the book of the gods you've never heard but have always known. And you can read about this, by the way, at songsofthemetamythos.com. Now, what's this all about, Chris?
It is a work of metaphysical fiction. Now, you're probably saying, what the heck does that mean?
Yes, I am saying that.
It's a book of myths. And to me, myth is a neglected genre. It's fundamental to, I think, the human nature, that we yearn to see ourselves reflected in the world around us, in the universe, and to think about life and the big questions of life in larger than life fantastical terms.
Well, since I'm an atheist, let me ask you, who are your gods?
Well, you could argue that maybe this is one way of looking at those questions. You know, are there gods? You know, it's very metaphorical, very allegorical, and it's sort of a hybrid between a novel and a collection of short stories, because it is really a myth cycle. It starts with the creation myth, and it is a whole bunch of different myths that all kind of stand alone, but they all form one big, larger story, which is a story about, gosh, it covers war, where we come from, where we're going, who we are.
Yeah. How do gay people fit into all this?
We have lots of gay stuff. There's gay relationships, lesbian relationships. There's a god who's like omnisexual. There's gods who change gender.
Even in the Christian Bible, they say in God there is neither, or Christ, I guess it is, there is neither male nor female, you know, east or west or all that stuff.
Well, that's one thing about the book when I wrote it, is that, you know, I've always found it very alarming that in the 20th century, we take our myths and we take them literally. Some people take their myths literally, and I think that's a huge problem, which is why the first words in this book are, this is just a story, you decide how much of it is true. Because myth is not meant to be taken literally. It is meant to lead your thought in certain directions that it wouldn't be able to grapple with without taking a fantastical turn.
We live in a troubled country where these stories that ancient people told themselves and that were codified in the Bible are now taken as the literal word of their God, and therefore must be, you know, complied with in every respect, although they don't tend to follow the Levitical code. But anyway, if you want to learn more about Chris Cooper's book, go to www.songsofthemetamythos.com. Thank you, Chris.
No, anytime. Thank you.
Now let's talk about the Oscars.
Yes. Neil Patrick Harris, I thought he did okay.
He's an out gay. I thought he did badly, and I loved him on the Tonys and on the Emmys. But I thought it's a very hard job. But I thought he really hit some wrong notes during the show.
Who hit a good note was that Graham Moore, who I assumed was gay.
We have a picture of him there.
And he made a wonderful speech about basically, if you're different, stay weird. Yes. You know, he said, I considered suicide at one point when I was young, and now I'm standing here. Someone who is out there listening to me, stay weird, and one day you'll be up here and pass it on.
It sounded like an It Gets Better speech, but we were kind of frustrated. Well, why don't you just say that you're gay, and why don't you say Alan Turing, who you wrote the movie about, is gay? And he said afterwards, I'm not gay.
catching us all by surprise.
My gaydar is dead.
Well, everybody assumed he was
No.
gay.
My friend Tony said, "Oh, he just seemed nerdy to me." But all right,
Well, I think we forgot to mention he won Best Adapted Screenplay for his screenplay for The Imitation Game, the movie about Alan Turing.
I was upset with Neil Patrick Harris when there was that mom who won for a short documentary on veterans, and she said, "I'm dedicating this to my son who committed suicide, and we need to talk about suicide." And then Neil Patrick, she was wearing a dress with a lot of, he just made a very inappropriate joke about her dress afterwards. And then after the documentary on Edward Snowden, Citizen 4 won, and Laura Poitras gave a very stirring plea to save our democracy, Harris says, Snowden couldn't be here for some treason. Well, it's just flipped, and it's it's sort of clever, but it's just like, my God, can't you let things be serious once in a while?
You
Glenn
told me
Greenwald, the out gay guy, was up there. He was very upset, but Edward Snowden.
You told me Edward Snowden thought it was funny.
He laughed. So maybe I should get more of a sense of humor.
All right.
The biggest gay moment was after Glory, which won for Best Song for the movie Selma, and the writers of the song, John Legend and Common, talked about that the bridge, the Edmund Pettus Bridge, which is in Selma, of course, is now a symbol of change and transcends race, gender, religion, sexual orientation, and social status. That's the only time people talked about gay stuff.
No.
It was during with the Selma tribute.
The gayest moment of the Oscars was when Gaga got up there and did an amazing, amazing performance of the Sound of Music medley. I was shocked and surprised by this.
All right. And we love Patricia Arquette, calling for equality for women, but then she went backstage and said, "Now we need to get you gays and people of color behind us." That was kind of a wrong note.
Let's talk about The Walking Dead. Yeah. I'm a huge fan of The Walking Dead, and they actually just introduced...
There's a series on AMC about zombies?
Yeah, it's about the zombie apocalypse. And they just introduced their first gay male characters. Now, they've had lesbian characters on before. They have a regular lesbian character, but this is their first gay male characters, and they introduced them with this really passionate kiss. You're seeing the kiss there on screen.
Well,
and
you're seeing it just before the kiss.
Just before the kiss.
They're looking longingly into each other's eyes.
But it was really important because up until then, you didn't know who this character was, and on Walking Dead, the big issue is whenever you run into someone who's alive, it's like, are they going to kill us? Are they cannibals? Are they crazy? Or are they actually still human beings? And this guy, they establish his humanity by showing him with his lover and giving his lover this passionate kiss when he finds out he's still safe. So that was really a wonderful, wonderful moment.
I ask myself those questions all the time, Chris.
It's important because Walking Dead has 17.3 million viewers for its season 5 premiere. Wow. It's huge. It's the most watched drama series telecast in basic cable history was that premiere. And most of those are geek guys, young geek guys, and they have tremendous problems with, not with lesbians, but with two gay men. So this is good on that level. And of course, a lot of them got on Twitter and said, oh my God, this is awful. This is disgusting. On a show where they show people having their faces munched off. But that doesn't bother them.
Oh, murder doesn't bother people, but kissing does.
Yeah. So.
Yes, it does. It always has.
Anyway.
All right. On Broadway, out gay actor Jim Parsons is taking on the role of God in a comedy called Act of God, opening May 28th, with previews from May 5th. Without director Joe Mantello, they say it's based on a book by God, as adapted by David Javerbaum, who was a 13-time Emmy Award winner as the head writer on The Daily Show. I wonder if the Pope will stop by to the show during his visit, if it lasts until September.
And Andy, didn't you have reviews you were going to give us?
Oh, well, I saw the thing I saw this week was The Lives of the Saints from the great David Ives. He's the guy who gave us All in the Timing, Venus and Fur, and so much more. He's really a terrific writer. But this is an evening of one acts, and there's the whole cast, which includes, there on the left, Arnie Burton, who was going back into the 39 Steps, by the way. Excuse me. Anyway, this was one act, and it was kind of hit and miss. What do I want to say about it? He's got very funny skits about friendship, words from the recently deceased, and the good women who work and help out at church. But some of the others fall flat. It's at the Duke Theater. The guy next to me laughed at every single thing that was happening in that play. I don't know if he was paid to do it, but he was having a wonderful time, and I had a mixed time. That's what I'm telling you.
Well, more entertainment news. Openly gay football player Michael Sam is going to be on the next edition of Dancing with the Stars, right alongside Suzanne Summers, Patti LaBelle, and Olympian Nastya Liukin.
Wow, Michael.
Yeah.
So I guess it's not football for him, although he still talks about going into the NFL, doesn't he?
Well, it seems to be a little bit of a conflict as to how he's going to do both, but we'll see.
The Leslie Lohman Museum of Gay and Lesbian Art in Soho has a new show called Irreverent, a celebration of censorship, exploring the history of censored LGBTQ art from around the world. It includes works by David Wojnarowicz, Robert Mapplethorpe, Andres Serrano, Barbara Nitke, and others. So check that out in Soho, the Leslie Lohman Museum.
And in not necessarily entertainment news, but in media news, MSNBC has replaced sort of maybe gay Ronan Farrow.
He won't talk about it.
Okay. Won't talk about it, Ronan Farrow has been replaced by very will talk about it, married, openly gay, married to a man, Thomas Roberts, who's also kind of stunning looking too.
And he runs a lot of shirtless pictures of himself online, who went to Russia to host Donald Trump's Miss Universe contest.
That
we were all protesting Russia.
Yeah, that we didn't like. But he's going to take over the afternoon time slot from 1 to 3 p.m. that used to be filled by Ronan and another broadcaster because they were tanking in the ratings.
Our correspondent, Shep Wannon, reports on a couple of entertainment news notes. Amber Tamblyn reprised her role as the lesbian daughter on the final episode of 2.5 Men. And the LA Gay Men's Chorus performed Monday on Good Morning America.
There you go.
We are just everywhere. You can't get away from us. What else have we got here?
I'm out. I think we've hopscotched around everything I have.
Oh, well, you know, shall we run that Alan Cumming? Could we go out with that Alan Cumming video about, what is the name of it? The Celibacy Challenge? That might be fun, and it's been nice to be with you. Can we do that? How about it? No?
Hello, America. I'm Alan Cumming, head of the Department of Sexual Abstinence. Did you know that the FDA recently changed its policy that banned gay and bisexual men from giving blood for life? Now, if you're gay and you want to save lives, the FDA will let you. You just can't have sex for an entire year. That's right. 365 days of celibacy. Introducing the Celibacy Challenge. So let's get to it. Let's start saving some lives. And to help you abstain from any naughty temptation, here are some fully approved activities that are guaranteed to make your year without sex fly by. Take a pottery class. Practice yoga. Learn carpentry. Work out. Join a Civil War reenactment. Clean your house. Learn arts and crafts. Practice for New Year's. Or there's another option. Sign our petition. Then share this video to pressure the FDA to change its questionnaire so donors are screened based on their exposure to risk and not their sexual orientation. So no matter who you are, you can save lives.
Next week.
A lot of fun. Thanks for being with us. And thank you, Chris, for being here.
My pleasure.
Terrific.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And Songs of the Metamythos by Chris Cooper.
There you go.
Take care. Bye-bye.